Chapter 3 and our look at supply and demand. Now we're getting a little more specific into what we really need to talk about, supply and demand. Supply, demand, price are inseparable. Price is the glue that brings together buyers and producers. So we'll talk about those three issues, but first we're going to talk about is demand. Now we deal with aggregate demand. Aggregate demand is the sum of all demand curves. So if you're creating a demand curve for a single product or a single service, you would survey people and say, well, you know, if this price is $2 per, if it's $2.50, how much would you buy? And you kind of combine it and you create a curve. Obviously, if you're a consumer demanding, as the price goes down, you would perhaps demand more up to a certain point. I mean, you know, if ShopRite puts cans of beans on sale, how many cans of beans are you going to buy at that sale price? You know, you're not going to fill your pantry with 200 cans of beans. Not happening. So it is downsloping from the origin, meaning that as the price goes down, the quantity, the X on the X-axis will go up. We'll see it in graph in a minute. But when we talk about aggregate demand, we're talking about the entirety of the economy. So all demand curves lumped together. And we talk about the price level in the economy rather than the price of a single good. So we talk like in the inflation level and how things are based on where they were years ago, CPI kind of index. And then we can kind of see where demand would be and what would happen if the price level in the economy changes. So let's take a look at our graph. And I got to explain, there's a couple of key differences in our terminology and our understanding that we have to be very, very careful about. So let me share screen and bring up the graph. Okay, so here we are with our graph. Now again, price level, anything price level, inflation, anything dealing prices on y-axis, and output is on x-axis or quantity. Now in this case, you've got three demand curves. Let's assume that we're at aggregate demand or AD, one, you know, the base one, AD. Okay, and as you see, as the price level is up, very little is output, very little is demanded. And again, demand is going to demand so much, output is trying to meet it. You don't want to go above it because that means you're producing stuff that's not selling. Now again, this is output, not sales, but we assume that all output is consumed. That the reason why we are outputting it is that we are going to sell it to somebody. We're going to, you know, and that's it. If there's more output needed, then we will produce more. But you see the downsloping from the origin means that basically as the price level drops, people should demand more. All right, so we live in a country where in your collective memory, inflation has not been an issue. It was for me. I remember growing up in the, grew up in the 60s and 70s particularly, a lot of inflation. Even in the 80s, there was a lot of inflation. And so that was a concern because if you're making a raise, if you get a raise of 5% and inflation 7%, you're actually losing ground in real purchasing power. Downward. So any kind of price change, or if suddenly now you're running a 10% inflation and then it drops to 3% for a couple of years, well, that drop in inflation is going to give you the confidence to demand more, and then output would rise because of it. In terms of real output, you know, real numbers are inflation adjusted. Okay, so the demand curve is as it is. We focus on drama. We focus on significant things happening to the point where that demand curve moves in its entirety. It moves the entire economy. It doesn't matter how rich, how poor you are, if you're big business, small business, consumer, it's moving the whole line. And those are the things that we have to be really careful of. Okay, those are the things that need to be addressed. Now, there are some components here. They're called determinants of demand, and these can affect the way that this demand curve is, and it can move it left or right. Now, in the case here, if our demand curve moves from AD to AD1, if we're going here to AD to AD2, excuse me, that means that the economy wants to run. The economy feels good, it's juiced, and it wants. So output's going to have to catch up with it. So the output kicks up, and as you see, all points along this line are going to benefit from that. That means at this price level, we move from this level of output to this level of output. If the price level goes down, if we look at this price level of an economy, if we're here, suddenly the output level is going to be there. And that's great. I mean, it's beautiful, it's wonderful, but we will see that occasionally that is not necessarily a good thing because demand forces suppliers sometimes into having to buy at a rush more materials, hire more people, and that drives inflation up. So the cost of doing business goes up. But for a while there, I mean, most businesses don't operate at 100% capacity. Right now, I think the capacity utilization number is a statistic that's tracked is somewhere around 70-something%. That means we could kick it up a little bit without having to add new production lines. All right, so you have this, you have that moving from AD to AD2, and that gives you the idea that this is something good happening in the sense that consumers are hungry, they have the willingness and ability to pay, so they're demanding more, and output is going to reach that. On the other hand, and let me just change colors here to make it clear. If we are moving from AD1 or AD to AD1, that's not a good thing. This is the economy basically taking a timeout or taking a breath or not being as willing to demand products as they have been. Dangerous, perhaps, yes, because it might indicate some larger issues in the economy, lack of confidence. So this is not necessarily a good thing. Any left shift of any of our lines here, with the exception of one, which is the Phillips curve, is a bad sign. All right, so what moves the line? Now, we're not talking about movement along line. That's going to be the second part of this presentation. But what moves the line is drama. And there are different types of dramas. They're called determinants of demand. And these determinants can affect this entire line. It can affect the output of consumer goods that are basic price kind of stuff like shampoo, or it can affect cars, luxury vacations, everything. All right, the first is the number of buyers, a demographic issue. Now, if you remember from the big PowerPoint that we had at the beginning here, the introductory PowerPoint, we mentioned that in Japan's case, and particularly, but also in Western Europe, and even in our case, we're starting to get there, the country's aging, and there's not a lot of people being born to replace them. So what happens here is there are fewer buyers in the market. If there are fewer buyers in the market, now older people, again, don't buy a lot of stuff. They don't buy a lot of tchotchke. They don't buy a lot of junk. They don't have room to store it, or they're downsizing. And plus their incomes are capped because they're on fixed incomes with pensions and with Social Security. So if there's no influx of boomers, okay, boomers, I mean, we need another baby boom to keep this going. You could see the line collapsing, going blue here in the blue arrows. Or if you have a baby boom, like in the 1940s, late 40s, early 50s, you could see consumer culture like that increasing the output, increasing the demand, and you could go into the terms of the red line movement from AD to AD2. So it's a demographic issue, the amount of buyers that are there. Again, buyers have to have the willingness and ability to spend, which is true, but if they're there, that's a potential thing. If they're not there, you're going to be trying to squeeze more money out of the existing people, and that's not going to be a good thing. You can't really squeeze more blood from a stone here. All right, so next thing to do is, and it ties into buyers in a sense too, the number of buyers, is income. If people's incomes start rising because they're working more, they're more productive, new industries develop, like in the 1990s with tech, people were coming out of college and getting really good jobs. I mean, these were the middle-class jobs of the 90s. They were tech jobs. They weren't factory worker, blue-collar, automobile assembly worker type jobs, because those jobs were slowly declining. But if incomes start growing like they did, the demand curve will shift rightward. It'll see like a red line here from AD to AD2. It'll move. People will have more money in their pocket. They're going to demand more things, not just the expensive things or not just the cheap price things. That's why the whole line moves. If people getting better jobs, they're going to buy better cars. They're going to go on better vacations. And even the poor person who's making, minimum wage suddenly now gets a 10% raise. Well, they're going to start buying more stuff on their end because they have more money as long as it's keeping ahead of inflation. And so the line kicks rightward. Then again, incomes you look at what's been happening here with the COVID recession, the incomes are down. People aren't spending. They're fearful of spending what they have in the bank. People's jobs have been cut. So there's a collapse. And the AD curve is seriously moving blue here from AD to AD1 and probably further even. And that's, you got to think about it. Obviously, people who are out of work aren't spending. They don't have jobs. And even the jobs that are there, they're not going to be giving out big raises. They do. I mean, essential workers, I know that Target and other Amazon, and that they kind of push that $15 minimum wage idea along ahead of the curve by giving them people, because they realize what kind of business they're in. But, I don't know if your restaurant workers are going to get a big raise if they're only operating at 25% capacity. So income is a determinant of demand. The number of buyers in the market is a determinant of demand. Now, the next category of things here kind of tend to be kind of all blended in together here, but you might see one of these kind of subcategories coming higher and then dragging the other ones with them. So the first thing is the price of related goods. All right, so if the main good becomes cheaper, so take, for example, price of oil. If gasoline was $4 a gallon, and all of a sudden now, because of whatever goes on in the world, fracking, production increases by the OPEC nations, whatever, and the price of gasoline goes from $4 a gallon to $2, that has a benefit in and of itself. But think about all the other benefits that kind of spin along with it. The price of goods that are trucked to your local stores will come down because the price of diesel fuel will come down. The price of an airline ticket comes down. Therefore, the price of a vacation comes down. So the fact that the related goods prices drop would increase the demand. If the related good prices go up, the reverse is true. If the price of gas goes from $2 to $4 a gallon, the price of jet fuel will go up, the price of diesel fuel will go up, and we'll feel it in many other ways, and it will collapse the AD line. All right, complementary goods ties into related goods. Complementary goods work with other things, and that could shift the demand curve as well for an individual product as well as for the economy. So if you think about a computer, the base desktop computer, well, if the price of the peripherals that go with it, the speakers, the monitor, the printer, also go down, it might encourage you to go out and actually get another new computer. Okay, so if the price of wireless service, 5G wireless service goes down, you might convert your phone, you might upgrade your phone. Okay, now that also includes substitute goods and the availability of them. If the price of substitute goods, if one good is high priced and we can substitute easily, then we'll demand more of the substitute goods. And the other good, the luxury good that's high price, will have to take a reevaluation moment there. Okay, so you have all of those kind of goods related issues, whether it's the related goods, substitute goods, or complementary goods. And that's complement with an E, two E's, complement. Complementary angles are supposed to equal 90 degrees, complementary angles. So it's like, not compliment as in, oh, you look nice today with the orange Hawaiian pineapple shirt. So those are the kind of things that go here. Now, the last one here is consumer expectations, and that's one of the statistics that you might be tracking as part of your presentations during the course of the year when we talk about consumer confidence. As a result of that, if consumers feel good about the future, they tend to open up their wallets ahead of time. If they know that their job's going to be safe and they're going to have some cash coming in, a bonus check or something like that, they will spend more money, and they will, they will enjoy themselves. They'll liberate their credit cards a little more. So, consumer expectations. If consumers, though, don't feel comfortable, they don't feel that their jobs are secure, they will stop buying. They'll turtle. turtle goes in, turtle goes into the shell. So if you see in a case where the trend line is showing consumer expectations and consumer confidence rising, you expect output to rise, you expect demand to rise, you expect going from AD to AD2. But if the confidence is lacking or falling, then you can see the AD line shifting. Again, 70% of our economy is consumption, consumer consumption. But aggregate demand takes into account everything. It takes into account business expenditures. It takes into account government expenditures. It takes into account foreign trade, net foreign trade, as well as consumption, which is what we do every day. So you can see that collapsing there too. All right, so that is how the AD curve works. The AD curve will move. Out of the two curves, aggregate demand or aggregate supply, the aggregate demand curve will tend to be the quickest to respond, okay, to anything going on in the world. Now, there are some circumstances where if the cost of a particular thing goes crazy, like oil, that could move the AS curve first, and then everybody else has to kind of fall in line. But AD is very sensitive. I don't want to say overly sensitive, but it's sensitive. I mean, because we're all thinking like, oh my God, the sky's falling. Or like that case after coming out of the 2007-9 recession, you had businesses that weren't confident in the future. You had consumers who weren't confident in the future, and nobody's dancing in the middle of the floor there. That seventh grade dance analogy, boys on one side, girls on the other side, nobody's dancing because both are shy, both are scared. So consumer expectations can work there in that sense too. All right, so now I'm going to shift the example here. So let me get out of this screen and let me bring up the other graph here that shows changes in the quantity demanded. Okay, so let's go withdraw. Okay. All right, so in this case, let me get the screen shared here now. Boom, share screen. Boom. Okay. Now, with this in mind, you have a single AD curve and you have movement along the curve. Now, the terminology may not seem like it seems like we're splitting hairs here, but a shift in the entire curve is a change in the nature of demand, or the change of demand in demand. This is a change in quantity demanded. The line's not moving, but there are other circumstances involved here that are changing just the quantity demanded. So let's say, for the sake of argument, we're at point L on this chart. And point L is an intersection. There's another line that's going through there. That's the aggregate supply curve. And suddenly now the cost of doing business decreases for whatever reason. Cheaper raw materials, for example. A significant tax cut for businesses, and they pass that along, which is not necessarily true. They don't pass it along, but they pass it along. Well, if the cost goes down, now we might be operating at K. That aggregate supply curve might move down and hit K, intersect at K. That's a change in the quantity demand. Now, again, any movement rightward is a good thing. So let's key up here. So this right here, a movement from L to K is showing an increase from Q1 to Q. That's a good thing. Output's going up. Output is tied to employment. Employment is tied to income. So you're hiring more workers, the workers are making more money, and it feeds on itself. Remember that circular flow argument from chapter 2. Okay. More workers contributing to the economy means more money in their pocket, means more products being bought, means businesses are happy, they start producing more, and it's like one big happy circle. Okay, so in this case, that has changed. There's some things here that have brought the cost in the economy down, and we've gone from PL, price level 1, PL1, to PL. So the price level in the economy has dropped, meaning the inflation rate has calmed down, the cost of doing business is less, and we're moving there. Now, if we have the reverse, and we are at K, and the cost of doing business goes up. Taxation, suddenly now there's a 10% surcharge in all businesses. Tighten up all those loopholes. Price of raw materials goes up. Price of oil, for example, goes up. Well, then we're going to change the output line from Q to Q1. Now, since the line hasn't moved, we cannot automatically assume that that shift there, that blue arrow shift from the quantity Q to Q1 indicates a recession. We can't do that right away. However, if the line moves, then we can kind of say, you know what, it looks like we might be heading into a recession. This might only be a temporary change, and that's why the line hasn't moved, because it's not any of those big determinants going crazy out of whack. It may just be a temporary bump in the road. And so we're not willing to call this necessarily a recession, although stagnant output or decreased output over a period of 6 to 18 months is technically considered a recession. So we'll wait on that one. But again, this is a change in the quantity demanded. And again, remember that we have, you have an aggregate supply curve here. You have an aggregate supply curve here. This could be AS, sorry. And this could be AS1. Sorry, it's hard to draw with that. So yes, something could be happening with the AS curve. Now that's the second part of my presentation. Second video here is going to be on the aggregate supply curve and the determinants there, and what happens with that curve and the lines that move. But the point in which AS and AD meet, that's called an equilibrium point. It's a short run equilibrium. That is the moment in time when the economy is where the economy is operating. Again, it's not the moment in time for each product or each service. It is the moment of time for the entire economy, the aggregate. All right, so we got to make sure that when we're doing our graphs and we're labeling them, we are labeling them properly, AS and AD, not just S&D. S&D is a single product. That's a microeconomics thing. And I know some of you will be taking the microeconomics exam when we get there, but that's the S&D. We do have some graphs that have S&D, but we have to pay attention. We're talking about the big picture economy here. We have our ASAD model graph, and that's what we use here. All right, so any questions about the nature of demand, the law of demand? How do we represent aggregate demand on the graph? What makes the lines move? Put that, please, in the Chapter 3 FAQ page, and we'll get on to the next topic, which is the supply graph. So we'll stop sharing there and stop the recording.